Okay, people. So I am joined by the executive producer of Waiting for the Lights to Change, James Choi. James, thank you so much for jumping on. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kevin.
Man, I thought this was a really interesting film because it's not action packed, right? It's just this kind of slice of life, right? We're looking at these, oh gosh, how many is it? Five friends, five people, like just in this course of few days, right? And it's done in a way that makes you kind of feel a little bit weird and guilty because it's like you're voyeuring these people. You know,
Yeah.
that you're just peering in at their lives. It's very fascinating. Like, how did you get involved with this?
So I'm a filmmaker based out of Chicago. I also teach film at DePaul University. And I started an initiative at DePaul 4 years ago where we fully finance and help develop uh, micro budgeted feature films um, that are completely directed uh, and crewed by students. So this is our third movie coming out of that initiative called Indie Studios. And so, we have the whole process of development and picking students out. And again, we finance the film. It's not a lot of money, but it's enough to get features
Mm.
done.
Well, I mean, this, right? You wouldn't go. I mean, clearly you can see there was not a lot of money spent on this. Yeah, that could have been better or that. No, it felt like a fully conceived, fleshed out studio project. You
Yeah,
know, it doesn't, falter on the budget front, like for the viewer, I feel.
no, not at all. And I think that's where we're at, Kevin. I mean, I think, you know, we're in 2023, technology is at a place that is unprecedented. And I think this idea of a film revolution, of this idea that we can now, the entryway into telling stories and making films has really, really been narrowed. And I think,
Mm,
we're following a very antiquated system that's been set up through Hollywood and this film industry that we have in the United States that is very prohibitive. That is all about saying you can't. You can't
yes.
because it costs too much. You can't because you can't get actors. You can't. And it's just been a real sort of a mandate of mine to try to get this message out that we can do it, and not only from the standpoint of visual aesthetics, which has been available to us for a long time now, the past 10 years. But there's so many talented voices and talented filmmakers out there, and obviously working at a university and working with young students, it really provides me insight into seeing that firsthand. And so, yeah, I don't think we miss a beat, really, to be honest. And people are shocked at how low. I mean, you think of low budget, and you think of low budget, and people would be mind blown with what we were able to do with this.
Yeah, it's the funny thing is, right? I remember, gosh, I want to say it was like early 2000s when
Hmm.
Gareth Edwards made
Hmm.
Monsters.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when that came out, it's just like, oh, this dude made a film on his Mac, right? And
yeah.
everyone's like, no, whoa, you can do, like, look what he was able to do with just a Mac, right? And that was then.
Yeah,
Now, everyone basically is walking around, with their phone, and
totally.
it has the ability to get such great shots. And obviously you can get different lenses you can attach, and now there's different pro. I mean, with the new update, Final Pro is now on the phone,
Yeah,
right? So it's just like the
yeah,
tools we now have, it's crazy. So I think, yes, as you said, right? It's oh, hold on, let me just, I've got this light on. As you say, you know, the entry to this has really been blown open. I think it just takes, sometimes it's the determination, or, you know, an institution like yours that has this thing so people can see and go, oh, I didn't know that was an option. All right, let's do this.
Yeah, exactly. It is purely a state of mind. It is purely just years and years of following something that we thought was the only way, and trying to break free from that, which is, difficult with
Mm,
everything. Difficult, and this is no different. So yeah, it's just that's been the thing. I mean, and as you said, like, I mean, this is not anything new, right? I mean, when the digital revolution started happening in 2015 with the Duplass brothers and Aaron Katz and Joe Swanberg and those guys, like that's where I was during the festival circuits, running into them and being like, coming from the studio world and going like, what? You guys can make a feature film for $60,000 that are playing at major festivals? Like that's
mm.
doable? And and it's like when you hear their story, which is now like 15 years old, it just seems like people sort of saw that and was like, oh, that was a cool anomaly. Now back to how do I raise $2 million to make my movie? And if I can't, then I guess I'm not making it. And you know, you're not going anywhere if you're letting sort of, again, the thing that stands in our way, uh, to prohibit us from creating, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. And I think we lost focus about the problem, and it's always been the problem has always been financing, right? And it's always
Yes.
been like, how do we get paid to make movies? And how do you narrow that gap for independent filmmakers? And I think it's just been like, I know that that's important. We all have to do it. I mean, this is the arts, right? It's like we wait tables, we do whatever we can so we could have a roof over our head and to have food on our table. And then we pursue the arts. We pursue this
Mm,
passion that we have, and that hasn't changed. And it's not about the solution to try to find money, to try to be like, where do we like? Does that onus fall on the producer? Does that onus fall on the director? These creatives in filmmaking don't have money, so it's not like producers and directors on the independent world, for the most part, are trying to exploit people. That's not why they're not paying people. They just don't have money. So
yeah.
it's got to be a collective effort of artists, of passionate storytellers, which includes the whole collective of, whether you're behind the camera, whether you're an actor, whether you're a writer, director. It's a matter of those collectives coming together and saying, let's not let money be the barrier. Let's pursue our passion and continue to tell stories and figure out how we can do that without this thing called money. Money is the handcuffs for all, like, anything that happens in capitalism, right? It's like, you
Mm,
want to include a huge population. It's like, throw the money and go, okay, so if you don't have X amount of money, then you can't do it, or you can't be a part of this. And I think we can slowly, or we're at a place where we can eliminate that big thing. And instead of focusing on the thing that we can't control, which is money, it's like you either have it or you don't. And there's a lot of people who don't. Instead of focusing on that, how about just trying to figure out a creative process for a collective of people who are passionate about this art form, and not creating because of this barrier, which is money. And I that's the biggest thing. And I think indie studios is one way of getting that message out. Obviously, putting people like Ling and this great crew that made this movie behind, and serving as an example of the success you could reach, is just going to continue to sort of invigorate and inspire, I hope, young filmmakers and young voices out there to not let that be a barrier to entry.
oh, I think for sure. I think people, especially, in the Chicago area, will see this and go, "Oh, they were able to do that. Oh,
Yeah.
I need to try and get my thing. I'll submit my projects, or even if they submit and it doesn't get picked, right? You still go, okay, so that's the budget they're talking.
Yeah,
I think I could put that together. So
totally.
let me go and do this. I
Yeah.
think it gives people the confidence to see something, to see this can be done in this way.
Yeah. And there's only one way to find out, right? I mean, you're only going to succeed through failure and learning the process. If you don't go through the process, then you're never going to know. Like
Mm.
you can't put all your eggs in one basket and hope that the one movie you're going to make in 10 years is going to be a huge hit or the masterpiece. Like, you have to continue. This is a long tail journey of discovery, a process that you need to continue to hone. And the only way that you can continue to become better and stronger is to continue to create. There is no shortcut to this. No
Oh, for
amount of
sure.
books and no amount of prep is going to prep you for a hit movie. There's too many other variables there that, the only sort of way to reach success and find success is to continue to create and learn this craft, which is all about doing.
Oh, yeah, and when you see people try to let's say take a shortcut, right? Or a studio, amount of times we hear they set this project up as a starring vehicle, a blockbuster, a tentpole for this person,
Yeah.
and it does nothing. Like, it
No.
does nothing, or we get told this person's the new star, or this person's the son or daughter of this star person, so they're gonna be big. And then you watch their thing, and you're just like, oh, that wasn't the one, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't the one.
Yeah.
But it takes time, right? I just remember early Brad Pitt, George Clooney, their films, they weren't great actors. They were not great actors out the gate, but
Yeah.
over time, practice, working on things, listening to people, you gain those skills. You see it with directors. There's some directors who it's their full fifth film, which is the one where you'd be like, oh, it's all, you can see it's all come together. Some
Absolutely.
people come out with a great first film, but then the next two, not great. And then they find it again. So it's this
Exactly.
process. It's fascinating.
Yeah. They don't come out of nowhere. They started, everybody started somewhere, right? And so just having that faith in new voices, truly. I mean, we use the
Mm.
rhetoric a lot, like, yes, we want discovery. Like, you go to a premiere festival and it's all about, the rhetoric is all about discovery, but are those people really new discoveries? I mean, or are they
No.
sort of in the system already, right? Like, when we're
Mm.
talking about true discovery, they're out there.
Oh,
It's
for
just,
sure.
it's about how do you open up the entryway so that there aren't gatekeepers, and that there aren't sort of these lines, right? And I think, again, that this is going to be the way. I hope.
Mm.
I hope it's a slow moving ship. I've been doing this for a long time, but I feel like, again, with movies like Waiting and Ling, it's going to start to open it up and open up that dialogue more and more.
Oh, I mean, when they see the quality of what can be done, it's because I think, a lot of times people hear indie, right? And they think, not as good, right?
Right.
It's not the same polish. It doesn't have the same impact. The stories are just all over the place, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a thing. And I think that narrative gets pushed. So people go, oh, I only want to watch a blockbuster because that will be a better production.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes these things get said because we don't want people to realize that you can do this independently of the machine.
Yep. No, totally. Totally. I mean, it's all about fear, right?
Yeah.
Fear of failing or fear of not doing something right. And I think we have to just let that go. I think these limitations are actual strengths. When you have limitations and you embrace the limitations is when you start to get creative. I mean, the
Oh,
process
yeah.
for the film was insane. It was not, like, nothing about this process, especially amidst COVID, was what we were anticipating or thinking when we went into it. But all of
Right.
those things aided into making this what it is, and actually made something truly special and made something that resonated because of those limitations. And I think, it's just about letting those, not embracing those limitations, and letting those go. I mean, I always go back to this idea of, Orson Welles, and the great stories he has about making Citizen Kane, right? Coming from the theater world, like never
Mm.
having made a movie before. And so he didn't really know. And it was just like, he was like, let's try this and let's do this. And people were like, well, we don't really do this in film, but okay, let's try it. And from that ignorance, from the sort of almost not knowing or not being scared, right, that you have to do it this way,
Yes.
comes, arguably the greatest film ever made, right? And so, I think that, and that's many, many, many years old. And I think there's so much to be taken from that lesson, and just be like, this isn't a structured thing. It's not, you have to do it this way or you're not legit. You have to do it this way or it's not a real film. And to be bold. And I think, again, when you take the finances out, what's great about it is the stakes are low. So you're not like, it's not like, oh my God, I got to make my $2 million back, or like
Mm.
everyone's ruined. My investors are going to hate me. I mean, we're talking money that is so low where it's almost like everything is a bonus out of this, including the process of growth. And so any success is just all icing and bonus on the cake. And we're not stressed about this idea, and it allows you to be open to be less fearful, to be bold, to make choices that maybe, if you're worried or you're concerned or you're fearful, you're going to play safe.
Yeah. I think, James, can you remember what it was about this script that
Mhm.
made it stand out, that made it like, oh, we've got to finance that one for sure?
Yeah. So the process is, we try to find the script and marriage, super talented director from this film school. We try to marriage those two things together. And we initially had a different script we were going to do. Um, but it involved, it was a high school setting. And that was obviously on complete lockdown during COVID. We were not going to be able to shoot in a high school. We were not going to be able to do the things that we wanted to for that film. And so this film came out of that necessity of like, we bless you, or that we weren't going to be able to do that. And so it was sort of, we were at this whim where we were like, okay, well, I guess we just don't do a movie this year because we can't. And then one of the producers suggested, and kind of threw out, he was like, my parents have this summer beach house in Michigan that's not being used. Could that be of use? Like, could that be something that we can play with? And so Ling and her producers went out there one weekend and just sort of hung out, just absorbed the location, and thought, could we make a movie here?
Mm.
Sort of like bubble ourselves, like get everybody out there. We're not going to leave. They're going to make the movie and sort of come up with something. And it was a very sort of organic process. And with that being sort of the spawn of this idea, and then they went off and started writing. And, to me at that point, it wasn't about, well, give me, I'm not playing the studio game, like give me a script and I'll greenlight it if I think it's worthy. It was more like, we have an idea. We feel like we can make it work. It's safe. Let's do it. And then it was up to Ling and the co-writers, Jules and Dahlia, to sit down and start coming up with scenarios and a storyline. And even that process was very organic for them, pulling in a lot of personal experiences and what did they want to talk about and what kind of situation did they want to create. So it was sort of again, it was just a process of embracing the limitations, embracing our current situation, and then having the support and the freedom to then go see what they can do.
Oh man, that's really interesting. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, that I think that's a big thing. You watch these things, but you don't even you can't contemplate how that got to you, right? The
Yeah.
different crazy journeys, the struggles, right? The barriers you have to overcome to get this to screen. So that's fascinating. And that they were able to pivot like that. That's, there's a load of people that could not do that. So that in itself is a huge skill to have in the tool belt.
Yeah. And I think again, you're being nimble, being small helps. All of those things help. Having time helps, right? I mean,
Mm.
typically on a normal film, you have, a very strict schedule. And it's like you have to make those days. When you have the flexibility, a little more of the flexibility in creating a location that works around, access, it allowed them to sort of be free with that. And so, yeah, I mean, I again, when the stakes are low and you're just like, hey, we get to go make a feature, let's be super creative about it and see what we can come up with. And there's no such thing as failure out of this, right? It's like you're going to walk away with a feature in the worst case scenario, and the experience of making that with a very small crew. And in the best case scenario, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's a big thing, right? And I don't think everyone always understands, but failure is only failure if you take nothing from it, right? Because
Exactly.
everything gives you an understanding of what to do next in anything you do, right?
Yeah.
Asking out, is asking someone out, right? If they say no, you can go, okay, yeah, maybe I could have got to the point quicker, or maybe I should do this.
Yeah.
It's just like writing an assignment. You like if you don't get a great mark, you can go, yeah, I probably waffled a bit. I
Yeah.
could make it more concise, right? Every single thing you do, if you take something away from it, it's never a failure. And I think we're told early on, be like, you failed,
Yeah.
you didn't do very well. And it's just like, no, I mean, you didn't get gold medal, right? You didn't get first place, you didn't get an A, but what have you learned from this process? So I think you're very right in the fact being, however this goes, they've won, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and they've definitely won because this film, it is captivating. It reminded me of, and I cannot remember the name. My memory sucks, James. But Sophie Capella did one of her early films, with the one before Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
Yes, the film she made before that, and it was
Yeah.
just
Somewhere. Was it that
yes,
other one?
yes,
Somewhere Lost Organization? Yeah.
yeah, Ethan Hawke, I think. Wasn't it Ethan Hawke? I think.
It wasn't Ethan Hawke. I forget his name, but yeah.
Mm,
The he was like a struggling actor having to spend
yes.
time with his daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And uh, not a crazy lot happened in the film,
Mm-mm.
but it was just fascinating seeing them, just live their life and do this stuff and that kind of thing. And so waiting for the life to change kind of reminded me of that, because we're not having these huge, crazy incidents, but you're watching it and you're seeing these people navigate these relationships, right? Navigating these friendships, these dynamics, right? Because you've got Amy who's lost a lot of weight, and it changes everything. And you can think to you growing up as a kid and things like that, and how certain little things can throw a dynamic, right? Because there's always that structure, and people think, okay, I'm the head of this friend group, and then someone else gets more popular, or they do a thing, and then everyone's looking, and it's just like, wait, what? No, that's not how it's meant to go. And so you're just watching the film and you're remembering like different situations from your childhood and growing up, and you're like, oh yeah, oh that's, yes, you have those conversations, you have those thoughts. It was very fascinating.
Thank you. I'm glad you responded to it. And again, I think, you know, why that's resonating and why it resonated with you, Kevin, and others, I think, is it's honest.
Mm,
You know, it's
yeah.
vulnerable and it's honest. And I think, you know, in our world right now, that is often things that we lack, at least in films, because it's so overly processed. And so when you throw something that is truly honest, and again, their process was so vulnerable, was so personal in many ways. Like, and this is not only from the writer and director Ling, but from the co-writers, they were pulling experiences from the actors directly and personally. And I think that honesty comes across. And I think what, you know, you start to realize is when you're looking for something that is universal, right? We're sort of like in the industry, we're taught what is trending. How do
Mm.
we how do we get the four quadrants, right? Like, how do we get something that everyone is going to relate to? And it's based on, you know, these concept ideas that we think are going to be the thing that draws people in. And
Yeah.
really, the most universal thing that draws everybody in is honesty. And if
Mhm.
you are honest with your characters and you're honest with your story, it will resonate because we all understand it. We all crave it. We want to see and experience someone going through something honest, because when we see that, it, like you said, we reflect back on our past and we go, you know, that those feelings were what I felt. Like,
Mm.
I connect, I understand that. And even though it's simple, the honesty that comes from that makes it resonate so much more, and makes it so much more connective. And I think Waiting does a really amazing job in doing that. And again, because their process was so sort of personal and honest, and Ling as a director was able to sort of break down the actors and make them feel comfortable to share. And the co-writers were all open to share their own experiences and share their vulnerabilities. That honesty really does come across.
Oh man, yeah. Just like in those situations, I mean, there's a scene with Amy and Alex, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, I think about you," and she's like, "Oh, you think about me?" And you can see that shift, right? Because it's just like, "Oh, someone's thinking about me."
Yeah,
Right? And you know, like when you think about it, you're watching that scene, you'd be like, yeah, obviously, right? It's nice to know someone's thinking about you, right? And if someone's like, oh, yeah, I think about you in this way, it then changes the way you look at them and you'd be like, oh, yeah, no, great. So you get this scene and you're just like, oh, man, yes. And as you said, there's the honesty in it, right? And I think there's so many like major projects where the character has to be polished,
hmm,
right? Someone has to be the hero, so you can't have a fall, right? Or they're the villain, so they can't have any redeeming features.
yeah,
And what we miss is people are so diverse, right?
yeah,
There's so many different layers to what makes someone who they are. And even someone that does the nicest things, there might be an element of them where if you only saw that, you think, oh, they're an asshole, right? So it's really for me just compelling to watch something like this because we do see that full spectrum of the human condition.
yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, just fascinating. And I think it's one of the things I love about a film festival because you can see stuff like this, right? And you don't always see it on, well, back in the day, you didn't really see it at all on like network TV
Yeah,
or from a major studio. Like
yeah,
this would be seen as art house was the expression at some point. If a big studio was picking up something like this, it's art house, that art
yeah,
house feature, you know. But now it just seems it's the indie scene that is coming with this really diverse array of stories that the major studios are shying away from because it's like, it's funny, right? Because I mean, the Ed Norton and even the Ang Lee Hulk are always looked at as being flops.
Right.
Where those films made a lot of money, right? Those films made a lot of money, and they're being called flops because they're being held up against like the first Spider-Man, X-Men films that made like triple, quadruple the budget, where
Yeah.
the Hulk films might have made double the budget.
Yeah.
So they didn't lose money at all, but they're looked at as flop, which is insane. And so it's
Mhm.
just like, I think the studios want to make a remake or a sequel rather than make a story like this a lot of the times, you know. So
Oh yeah.
it's great to see it.
Yeah. This would never get made. Um, I mean, this would be a hard sell for private equity, let alone studios. Yeah, I mean, these are not the type of movies, at least in the States. And I do think that, there are obviously more European films, Asian films, South American, film outside of the US definitely allows for this sort of, uh, these types of films, uh,
Mm.
just because, again, they're not driven by box office, right? It's not about how much profit it's going to make necessarily, but more about what's the best story we can tell. And I think allowing the directors that sort of support is going to yield some really interesting, bold projects. And we don't have a space for that in the US right now.
Mm. But I think what you're doing is incredible. Like it's so great that you've created this platform for people to be able to tell different stories. And I think it's a model that other like universities, other institutions can look at and go, you know what, we could do. Why aren't we doing that? Why are only they doing that? You know, whether it's they come to you and go, yo, can we create an offshoot? Like, can we create an LA branch of what you're doing? Or, you know what I mean, a Washington branch, you know what I mean, whatever it is, or can we just work with you to create something similar? I think it's something that would benefit every like major, you know, city, every hub.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so, Kevin. I hope that it starts to get out there, and people can sort of look at it and have a different sort of mindset. As I said, I think it really is a state of mind, and it's about just trying to shift our perspective and our perspective of what that process is supposed to be. And so, yeah, I mean, I hope it catches on, regardless of, whether they come to me or not, or whether they do it on their own. I just want more and more people. It's going to benefit all of us. It's going to benefit the industry. It's going to benefit filmmaking as an art, as a craft, and as a form of entertainment that we can all learn and grow from, in a different way that is outside of sort of the system.
Mm, mm. Now, I think there is like this thing that is another like barrier with filmmaking because there what yeah, I forget what it is, the figures, but it's something like there's a certain percent of the budget, like what you spend on making a film, you should spend on marketing the film,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Which blows my mind. Right,
Oh, it's
when you hear the marketing budget of some films, like they spend 100 million to do this, and I'm like, why? Like I could have done that, or that. Well, I could have done something more compelling for
Mhm,
so much less,
mhm.
right? So, with what you're doing, like, what kind of work do you do around that aspect of the process?
The marketing
Yeah.
element. I mean, I think that's the big hurdle, right? And that's the hurdle that I think independent filmmakers constantly struggle with. And that's, marketing, again, reaching audiences in the past was all about money, right? If you don't throw up 30-second ads on TV that everybody is watching at home, how do you reach these people? And it was impossible to do almost on your own. I mean, you could do the sort of circus route and do a caravan across the country and stop in and do that, but it was really hard and it was very limiting. And now with the inception of this computer we're using and the inception of social media, that is starting to branch out. We are able to connect with our audiences. We are able to connect with niches. And I think, you know, that part of the ownership is, again, this sort of restructuring of filmmaking as a process, not only the creation of the story, but then how are we getting it out? Because it's got to the point where we're giving our films away to distributors and they're not putting any money into marketing either. And so they're stoning it and they're saying like, hey, we're going to put it on iTunes, like tell everybody, you know, we're doing the marketing anyways.
Yeah.
And so how do we figure that out? And how do we figure out the ownership of continuing to get that out? And I think it's twofold. It's like, you know, I know we as creators, we didn't sign up to be marketers, right? That's not, we want to tell stories and make movies. We don't want to be selling them necessarily. And that was the role of the studios and distributors. And now it's just a matter of figuring out, how does that model work? Where does that model work? Now it's sort of like you're an independent filmmaker making independent films. So eventually you can prove to people that you are competent and you're talented. And then you make that leap into the studios where they are going to pay you millions of dollars and they are going to spend millions of dollars for marketing. And there's no sort of gap in between. And that's been a big jump in itself, because it's hard to create something because people are not creating because they feel limited, because they don't have the money. And then when they do, then there's a next level of how do you get my movie out? And I think, you know, you touched on this, and, you know, really right now for independent filmmakers, your biggest distribution platform is film festivals, right? And there are plenty, thousands. And so, you know, we gotta embrace that. And again, work with these platforms, film festivals that are supporting independent discoveries and young voices. And again, you know, people might think like the end all is Sundance, South by, Tribeca. If you're not in one of those, then your film is a waste. And we have to let that go, or that it's not successful. And we have to let that go and go, there are thousands and thousands of film festivals in North America alone. How do I utilize that? How do I build my audience? And how do I capitalize the platform they're giving me? I mean, it's shocking when you talk to a lot of young people how they don't really fully understand what festivals are. I mean, they only know about Sundance or like, you know, and, you know, if you look at the statistics of Sundance, something like that, it's like, I don't like 0.002% that your submission's going to get in. And that's, you know, if you don't know anybody and you're doing a blind submission, like, again, those odds are like, you have a better chance of getting a car accident that year than getting in. And you can't lean your hopes on that one thing. And you have to understand that there's an infrastructure of film festivals that are available for you to then develop your marketing strategy and your distribution strategy and your audience outreach strategy. And then thinking about how you can utilize that, because they're there. They're there and they're available. And the whole purpose of festivals is to support young filmmakers. I just don't think it's not being taught enough. It's not being made aware enough to young filmmakers for them to understand outside of like the top three.
Yes.
And it can't be that or nothing, because again, then you're playing the lotto, right? It's like that you can't depend, like, we would all be starving if we just depended on the lotto to be like, okay, we're going to hit jackpot on the lotto. And hopefully we will, or we're going to starve. And you can't continue to live like that. And you can't continue to make films like that, because there are other avenues for survival of sustainability, but you just got to utilize that access that's available to you and educate yourself. And I see young people always go like, I'm just going to make something really good and it'll get into Sundance. And that's so, like, that's just one small variable out of so many variables on even getting into a place like that. And you just have to be smart about and educate yourself, even just simply on, like, if you ask young filmmakers, like, how many of you watch films that play at South by? And that percentage of young people who actually understand these festivals mandates, or like what their sensibilities are very, very minimal. Like
Yeah.
they like, unless that film gets picked up, and again, that's such a small percentage, is a hot movie and gets picked up and put in theaters, they don't know any movie that played at those festivals. But at the same time, they're like, my aspirations are, I'm going to play there. Well, how are you going to play there if you have no idea what they even play? I mean, that's like the basic first step, is just understanding. And maybe your sensibilities aren't their sensibilities, and that's okay. Then don't play at South by. Like, find a place that embraces the things that you want to make, and figure out how to target that audience and how to make your work there. Because trying to fit your sensibilities, that's not the sensibilities of a major festival, is like you're trying to put a square into a triangle. It's not going to fit. So you just got to know that. I mean, that's like the first step, and I think, that again, it just comes down to educating ourselves, educating young filmmakers and others about, what is my best approach? How do I approach this process, so that I can start to find a sustainable sort of life doing this craft that I'm passionate about, this art form that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, no, I think that is the big thing, right? It's realizing that there's so many different festivals, right? And Sundance, South by Southeast, just all of these supposed big ones aren't the only ones. It's not the be all or end all, because how not every film that screens at one of those festivals goes on to be a success.
No,
You
that's
know,
only the
and
first step.
yeah, and you're putting your your life in the hands of people, right? People. Like,
Yep.
you can ask someone, like, what's your favorite ice cream? And they'll be like, oh, I like vanilla. And someone else is just like, oh, vanilla sucks. Right. So those people with differing views are the ones that are telling you your film is good enough or it's not good enough.
Yep.
Right? On no other real criteria. It's what they like is the things that would go in. So just because you don't make those doesn't mean your film was a bust. It just means it wasn't those people's taste. So fine, we'll go somewhere else. Or, if nowhere else is picking up, or if everyone else is charging too much, maybe if there's a group of you, if you have a community, set your own thing up. Do your own
Yep.
thing. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, there's so much we can do now that isn't beholden to, the beast, right? It's not these overseers going, no, you cannot do that, and because there's all these different criterias now. Like, I just saw they've changed the criteria for best film at the Oscars.
Yeah.
So there's all of these different things which then might limit certain films being able to do that. So now they can't go for that award. And you just have to kind of go, actually, do we give a fuck about this award? Right? What are these things actually bringing to us?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to think about those.
We do. That's a big part of this whole sort of mindset and this whole lesson. I mean, it's amazing. I've had film screen at South by and Tribeca and major festivals, and it's great. It can benefit your film tremendously, but that can't be the only thing that can't be the make or break. And you always have to question and ask yourself, like, what are you doing? And what do you want this to be? And again, like, we act like it's like we act like it's computer days. Like, the world is small. Like, this little thing that's sitting in front of me provides me access to thousands and millions of people right now without me asking permission whether I can get it to these people. And so, it's just, again, a mindset of just, how can I approach this? Those things are icing. Those things are gonna, of course, help you, because we live in a commercial capitalistic country. Like, being in those high profile places are going to give you exposure for sure, but that's still a small percentage. That's like 1%, right? And it's like, so if you're not a part of the 1%, then what? Then you're just out of luck, like you're not going to do it. Those odds are crazy. You can't live on those odds. And so you got to just create that for yourself, and we have all the tools and the necessary tools to be able to do it. But again, I can't tell you how powerful, you know, our mindset and just our routine, you know, being controlled, right? Just this idea of following the master, how hard it is to break from the master, even when you know you can, because we've been under that sort of rule for so long.
Yeah. No, I think that's a huge thing, a huge thing. And like with what you're doing, like how much of this kind of stuff is the conversation, you know, of this whole process?
It's everything. I mean, because these students don't know either. I mean, you know, they don't know that you can go make a feature for, you know, this little with 8 people. Like this is, you know, they're doing like shorts with that amount of money or that crew size, and it's a challenge. And so they're like,
Mm.
a feature. And so it's really about this. It's just about getting them in the right frame mindset and helping them sort of find the confidence and belief that it's doable. And then that's one step. And then the actual going through the process is then the thing that actually starts to reawaken. We've had students come out of this who might have been, you know, the gaffer or the sound guy, who then goes through this process, watches it and goes, wait a minute, I'm going to go direct my own feature, regardless of whether it's through this DePaul system or not, because now I saw it. I saw
Yeah.
it work, saw how manageable this is, and then they go off and do it. But yeah, it's you know, this is not about, you know, this isn't as technical as people might think, because that's where we're always going, and we're going like, is there like some magic secret sauce to the technique? But it's really, it's this. It's just about clearing
Mm.
your head and just like going, wait a minute, you know. And I think, you know, there's a saying about ignorance makes you fearless, and obviously, as a general rule of thumb, like in most things, it's that's not good. That's not a good philosophy to live on. Like you don't want to be ignorant, right? Like you
No.
want to educate yourself. But there's a thing about the film industry and the process, right? That again, because this sort of older, antiquated system of the industry that filmmaking has become here in the States has created this idea of the no, right? Like you can't do this without X, you can't do it doing it without this. And so there's a level of like stripping yourself from that and becoming ignorant to this idea or this process that's been created and letting that go, right? And if you can let that go, that's when this new form and this new route will happen for you. And so it's almost like it makes you fearless if you don't know. Like my first film, we took 7 Americans out to China to make a feature, and none of us spoke the language. None of us had ever been there before except for a DP. And people were like, you're crazy. And this was our first film, so we didn't know. Like we were a little bit ignorant to the process, but we thought, hey, we have a script, we have actors, we feel like we have the know-how to go make a movie, and so we're going to do it. And you know, and it ended up winning at South by, and a lot of great things came out of that movie. And part of that is again just sort of letting that go. And it's hard because of all the noise that we're getting, right? So it's hard to sort of act ignorant to this idea and this process, because we're like inundated with noise saying you can't do it this way, you can't do it that way. If you don't have SAG actors, then you're going to get poor, not like you're not going to get real actors, and they're not going to be any good. Like all these
Mm.
things bombarded your way, and you just got to let that go. Otherwise, it's really hard to be fearless because you're living in fear because everybody's telling you can't do it. And then you're like, maybe they're right. And then you get scared and then you don't do it. Whereas if you just sort of block that out and sort of become a little ignorant, at least to the process, to the precedents and this sort of system that's been set up, it'll free you up to be just bold. Like you'll just be like, I don't care if they're telling me that you can't do it. I'm looking at my outside world and I'm seeing that it's sunny. I could go out there and do it.
Oh man, so much so. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's mindset is everything, I
Yeah,
think. And I think
absolutely.
giving people the reinforcement to be able to think like that is so important, right?
Yeah,
Because I think it's one of those weird things, right? Because when you think about representation on screen and behind the scenes, like it's important, right? But growing up, it wasn't like that. But
yeah,
I could watch, I mean, like let's say X-Men and well, not X-Men, let's say Superman, right? I remember those early there was no diversity really in that, but I could still enjoy that story. But then when you see something like Black Panther, oh man, just the feeling of just seeing all of that, and but it not being, because I never reference Black Panther as a black film. I think it's a great film made with black talent, right? And the beautiful thing was coming out and just kids of all race, gender, whatever, going Wakanda forever, and it's just like, yo,
yeah,
that's so great.
yeah.
And but it's like there was a point where people said that couldn't be a thing,
No, yeah,
right? They're like, it won't sell. You
yep,
can't do that.
yep,
And so I think it's you giving these students like this insight is so valuable, right? It's there's so many people would go, it can't be done.
yeah,
And we know it can be done. We've seen so many things that we were told that can't be done happen. And it's just like, right, why are these people constantly lying?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so you giving people this light to carry is such a huge thing, man. Like so much props for just setting this up. This is amazing. Really is amazing.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. And a huge part of it is the openness of the students, and to them to be able to let it go. Like, because you have to let it go. You have to let a lot of fear go, and you have to trust the process. And these students are doing it, and the ones that do it and really push it and embrace it, like, this is what happens. And waiting is the perfect example of these talented students embracing this idea and making it their own and creating a process for themselves that works and work for them. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was really beautiful to see them growing as artists and growing in their process. And it's funny when you talk to Ling, like, she's like, I don't even know if I'm ever gonna do this again, like, this way.
Right.
She's
Yeah.
like, but there's so much still, like we talked about earlier, like, that she's going to pull, right? Things that work,
Mhm.
little things, the way she worked with actors, the way that she held rehearsals. Like, there's things that I know that she'll pull from that she definitely has embraced. But like, there's a lot of it that she's like, I don't ever want to do it like this. Like, I don't want to be this winging it to a certain degree. But opening that and embracing that is what allowed them to do and create this film.
Mm. And once, a film gets made with this process, what then happens? Is there like lines of communication kept with those creatives? Like, how do you then move forward with things?
Yeah, so we do a selection process. So it's like a 3-quarter long process. So we pick the crew, then we do pre-po, we do the production, and then we do post. And then, I'm always available then to help strategize their festival run. I'm there to aid them in regards to their distribution deals and how they're going to go about and approach distribution, until it gets sold. And then off to the races. I mean, the beauty of it too at DePaul, which is unprecedented, is that the school doesn't own the film. So
Oh, nice.
we give them the money, we give them the support, then they've created an LLC where they're all a part of it, and they're off to the races. And again, in its success, I mean, this is a very quick rise to a certain degree. They move on. I mean, Ling has just signed with the management company, and her future looks bright, and she'll have some opportunities and to continue to move forward. And that goes for everybody, all the producers. A lot of the people on the crew are continuing to work actively in the Chicago filmmaking community. I'm sure they'll be working on future projects, a lot more future projects, and this experience is going to be tremendously beneficial to them. So we just ride it out all the way till the end. And this is our third film coming out of that program. The first film, while it didn't have as much success, we were able to carry that through. It's called Sun King, through the digital sort of aggregators now. And so they were able to sign with Film Hub and get it out on basically, all the digital platforms that are out there, like iTunes, Amazon, Film Rain, and Tubi, and all the other sort of multiple platforms. And then once that's done and it's out to the world, then we're always communicating. Obviously, our relationship is obviously will continue, but as far as the life of that film, and then it's up to them whether they want to continue to push it. And you could literally spend another year marketing it and doing all that, or you could get it out to the world and then move on to your next project.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. No, it's fascinating. This whole process is really interesting. And for you, there's you've worked in so many different capacities with film. Like, what has been the like? Is there one that is more fulfilling, or one that interests you more than the others, or is it just they all bring a different, sense of joy to you?
I think, ultimately I want to tell stories. So, I've spent 20 years in Los Angeles working in the industry, the business of filmmaking. And ultimately, that's led me into the independent world, and fully embracing the independent world and what that means. And so I love working with creatives. I think I'm shifting. My background primarily has been in producing, but I'm shifting into writing and directing more. And I think
Okay.
that's where my focus will be for the next couple years. But I'm always going to have my hand in producing, because I mean, through Indie Studio, I will always have a hand in executive producing and guiding the college students. And then outside of that, I frequently have collaborators that I work with, that I produce, who are doing amazing work. And so I'll still be working with them, and then also just developing and working on my own projects. But that just, once the world changed, and once I got out of the system, I'm now based out of Chicago, where I grew up. Just this freedom,
Mm,
and this idea and the embracing of diversity right now just has opened up the world in ways that, is all new to me, because this was not something that was available to us. Like, I could
yeah.
not tell, like I have a project right now that's Korean centric, and it's not a project that would have been almost impossible to make,
Mm,
even 6 years ago. And so, with this sort of newfound sort of attention and at least support, it's really exciting. And so it's just about, like, there's no holds bar now about asking for permission. It's about just figuring out how can you do it. And so I'm just trying to sort of apply that to my own stuff and move forward. But for me, it's just the biggest fulfillment is just working with creatives and creating, and I think that's ultimately so exciting, to just be able to do that. And you feel so, blessed and lucky to be in this industry where this is what we do for a living.
man, yeah. No, it's so much truth in that, and I think it is like because as you said, just a few years ago, there weren't these stories,
No.
and that's so crazy because, watching, watching Waiting, you don't go, I mean, I can't connect with those people because they're not my background.
Yeah.
Right? You don't think that. And so this lie, this bullshit that was being sold to us for all of these years that, oh, you can only relate to people that are white or
That
this
look
or
like you.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane because I'm watching this and you're watching these people navigate these feelings and emotions, and you're like, oh, I remember being in that place, right? I remember feeling like Amy. I remember like this or that. And you're like, yo. And it's just like, you're not going, oh, well, I mean, they don't look like me, so I can't think how they think. You're just like, no, it definitely reminds me of, and it's the story, right? You're looking at the story. That's the thing, right? Because people go, you need a big star, right? You need, the third act to be this or the beginning to be that. And it's just all a lie. You need a story. So when people say cinema's dying, this is dying, no, it's not. It's just the stories that are currently there aren't cutting the mustard,
Mm-mm.
right? You don't have to do a remake, you don't have to do a sequel. You just need compelling stories.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully that continues. I mean, I do really believe it's really interesting. This conversation, I just had this conversation with a friend of mine. The idea that theaters, the idea of community, of people going to theaters to watch movies is dying. And it's really interesting this, like, I feel like the studios sort of have it backwards right now. That, like, when you go see a CGI film, right, or like a big sort of special effects laden film, that's almost a movie you could watch on your phone. It's
Mm.
not like they sold us like you got to go to the theaters to watch this, but it's like I can watch that on my TV and be fine, or like watch it on my thing. And what's really the movies that you really should go to a theater is you should go see a movie like Tar, or you should go watch independent film, because you that environment, to be engrossed in that character and to be patient and not be distracted, allows that. And I see it when I go to the art house theaters, what they qualify as art house theaters in
Yeah.
Chicago. There's a craving and an audience for that. That is
Mm.
way stronger. That community is so much stronger than, a Marvel movie, which is going to have a big box office on the weekend. And then, like, you go there on a Wednesday night, like, nobody's in the theater. But you do a screening of at the Music Box, and, you can bring in 700 people for, a retrospective on, Jim Jarmusch on a Wednesday, and get 700 people to show up. And so
Mm.
I do think that there is something about that reversal that is going to start to happen, because we're being inundated with that. And you don't need to, you honestly don't. Like, you can watch and enjoy an action movie, and if you're not totally engaged on your phone or your TV for a 20-minute fight sequence, you're not going to miss out that much. And of course, there are some movies that are awesome to see on the big screen, but for the most part, and I think there are just specific sort of independent films that really bring you in, and you come out transformed when you go to a theater and watch it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, man. No, the thing that I think is, which everyone seems to be missing and not talking about, but I remember as a kid, right, could go to the cinema with £5 in my pocket, and that's the bus there, the cinema ticket, some sweets and a panda pop in the newsagent across the road, and I
Yeah.
still got a little change. Right now, going to the cinema,
Oh my God.
it's insane.
It's
It's
insane.
insane. And the markup on concessional stuff, right?
Oh,
People don't go to the concessions because I remember I worked in a cinema when I was at uni.
Yeah.
And like, let's say a bag of Skittles, you might go to the supermarket and it's 70p. In the cinema, it was £3.20. And it's just like, what is that markup?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right. And it's those things that are stopping people from going to the cinema, because what cinema was always considered as the cheap date, right?
Total.
The cheap, if you don't have a lot of money, go on a date to the cinema.
Yeah.
You'll have a great night. Boom, you're set. Now, cinema is not the cheap, it's not the cheap option. So
Yeah.
it's just like, bring down that cost and you'll sell more tickets.
Yeah. I know. And again, I think smaller theaters sort of or at least embracing that more. It's still expensive, but yeah, I mean, yeah, going to a studio release now in a multiplex. I mean, I just took my daughter to go see Elemental. It was like, for 3 people, it was like $60-$70, I think,
Yeah.
including tickets and drinks and treats and whatever. I mean, it's like, I'm like, this makes no sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was the film, by the way?
I enjoyed it. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know, like I having young children, I if there's any genre that I see is a lot of kid stuff, and I have to say, like, the kid stuff, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if I were to sort of compare like kid stuff to Fast and the Furious 20 or whatever, like, I feel like the quality in these animated stuff is much higher. I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk of people saying Pixar has really gone downhill since Disney acquired them, but I still thought it was really good, and it was really interesting because it's an immigrant story, set in a romance. But again, thematically, I just think, man, and I have a young daughter, so I just love all the stories that are coming out that are just empowering these young women to look at their roles in ways that they never did when I was growing up. And so that's always really nice.
Yeah, man. I think that's always a fascinating thing. And I think what you just said there, right? Where it's the narrative. Pixar's gone downhill since Disney bought it.
Yeah.
Which I'm just like, is it though? Is it though? Because I love Soul.
Soul was amazing. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think we're told this thing, right? We're told you should like this film, right?
Yeah.
You should hate this film.
Totally.
You should, this actor, this actress, like them. These ones, no, they don't cut it.
Yeah.
And we're told all of these things. Like, before a film comes out, you're told, right? This is good. Oh,
yeah.
I wouldn't bother with that one's bad. And it's just the amount of times I've seen a film that is supposedly bad, and I've gone, I love this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And when you mentioned it before too, and it is like the standard, like, they're like, it sucks because it didn't make $1 billion, and it's like, while this other one did, so it's not as good. And you're just like, is that really the quantifier? like it made 200 million. That's not enough. So it just means it's not as good. It's not attracting as much dollars to the theater, so it must not be as good. And you're just like, that doesn't really that should not quantify whether that movie is good or not. It's a weird sort of like barometer to judge whether a movie is good or bad.
Yeah, I think as you say, our barometers on success are so far out of whack, right? It's just like, just in an everyday organization like PepsiCo or Procter and Gamble or something like that. If you're not making a profit every year, you've had a rubbish year.
Yeah.
When you're just like, okay, look at your target audience. Are they always going to want a new TV every year, right?
Yeah.
Are they always going to want new phones, so there's going to be a year where you're not making a profit because everyone's got the thing, right? So like maintaining, right? Word of mouth. Everyone's still going. Apple are a great company, man. Their customer service is like the best. I didn't buy a new Mac this year, but they made sure my one is fixed and it's great. Boom. So you're not making a profit, but everyone's still looking at you in high regard. That should be the thing, right? How are people perceiving you? How
Yeah.
are people enjoying your stories? But it's just like, did you make this much of a profit? Oh, you didn't? You're a failure.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's scary. It's scary. It's scary where, I mean, hopefully, again, as the sort of media industry is collapsing, and as we are becoming less and less, uh, you know, uh, we're just becoming so much more skeptical of news media. Like everything is media now based on something other than what it was intended for.
Mm,
That's film is no different, has fallen into that. And so I hope, I mean, like you said, like going to theaters, man, like those were like, those can be an amazingly transformative experience of just feeling empathy, of changing, of learning something new about people or things that you didn't know before. I mean, that's the true power of cinema and film. And like, if we lose that, it's going to be sad. And I hope that we don't. I mean, I'm not totally pessimistic. It's scary seeing some of the stuff out there and the way that the industry's going, but that I hope that, and I think that's the real importance of sort of the new voices and this new generation of filmmakers, is that we don't lose sight of that it doesn't become an industry. It doesn't become just something that it wasn't intended for, which is to sell and
yeah.
to sell something and make money. That's there's so much more power to storytelling and film, and I hope we don't lose that. And I think the more that we allow people to tell their stories, we won't. But it's not going to come without challenges, for sure.
Oh, I mean, yeah, challenge is always going to be there. But when, like, I've seen, I was so lucky to be able to see John Singleton talk before he died,
Mhm.
which was just like, oh man, it was so fascinating seeing like Spike Lee, seeing Pam Grier talk,
Yeah,
and other like creatives just talk about the process back in the day
yeah,
and the struggle, right? The struggle. But every time they talk about having this community, like working with this community, or
yeah,
having like a mentor who gave them the confidence to strive,
yeah,
right? Because that's all it is. Sometimes it's like whatever it is, filmmaking, writing, you know what I mean, just other forms of industry, you talk to people that have had mad success. A lot of times they'll experience is they'll say, I didn't think I could do it. But this one person, this teacher, this other person in business, they sat down with me and they told me,
yeah,
look, I believe in you. I think you can do this. Or they showed me like the things I was missing. So I learned the process from this person. That is universal, right? So what you are doing is that, right? You're passing it forward. You've climbed the ladder, you've turned around, and you're helping the next generation up. And that is a beautiful thing, because we have seen so many times of people climbing that ladder and then kicking it away and going, I'm here, you can't be here. So, hey, I'm saying, man, mad props to what you were doing. I don't think it can be expressed enough how huge it is, you know? So, you know what I mean? I'm so glad I got to see this film. I was so glad I got to see this film, you
me
know what I
too,
mean?
too.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what what comes next year from you guys, you know? And hey, definitely come by for a conversation. Definitely. And when your projects you're working on, right? Definitely. I'd be so, you know, interested to talk to you about them. Oh, and I must say, St. Francis was incredible.
Thank
I loved that film. Oh, it was so great, man. So yeah, mad
you.
props for that one as well. Because oh, it was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kev. It was great. It was great to hang out and then talk with a like-minded soul in the cinema world, and I really appreciate obviously the support of Waiting and all that you do. So thank you for all that you do. It's essential part of this process as we get our movies made, and then in the hopes of trying to reach a wider audience and get it out there. So really appreciate all that you do as well. So thank you.
Oh, I mean, thanks, man. But all I'm doing is watching, the great stuff that other people do, right? And I just think I want to have like honest conversations with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it was just like in the past, I just kept on seeing these really short interviews, right? 8 minutes, 5 minutes. And it's just like, what can someone say? You know what I mean? Or the questions were just like, so James, what's your favorite food? What did you go to get on craft services each day, James? And it's like, Jesus, what are we doing here? So when people have put their heart and soul into something, you should afford them the time and space to be able to talk about it. So it's just like there's no time limits. It's just like, tell us your story, man. And I think when people hear the story, when people hear the passion, because the passion comes through, man, having these conversations, like the way you're talking about the scheme, just everything, what Lynn's done, you know what I mean? You can clearly see you're passionate about it. And I think that's compelling. That makes people go, yo, they believe about that so much. I need to go watch that. Right? That sounds great. I need to see that. Where is that showing? What festival? What screening? How can I be a part of this thing? So that's all I'm trying to do, man. That's all I'm trying to do.
Well, that's huge. I mean, that those small things all add up, and so yeah, it's really again just appreciate it.
Oh man, thank you. So Waiting is having its SoCal premiere on Wednesday, the 28th of June at 9:15 in the evening. Is there going to be a Q&A there?
There will be a Q&A. Yep.
Okay. Are you going to be in attendance?
I will be there as well as a lot of the crew and cast, and of course Ling's going to be there. So yeah, if people are around in Southern Cal and Los Angeles, please come by and say hello. We would love to see you, and of course we would just love for you to see the film. So
tremendous. People, the ticket link will be on the website, all the socials, everything like that. So make sure you go buy your ticket. Don't miss out, right? Because this is such a great film, just a human film, right? So go check it out. Follow everyone involved, because it's clear they're going to go on to big things. I mean, what are we talking about? They're going to go on to big things. And make sure follow my man James, because he is steering the way, right? He's breeding this new generation of mad talent, as well as creating great things himself. So hey, make sure you do all of those things. I hope you have a great experience on the 28th, man.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to coming back and enjoying screening the film with folks out in LA.
Nice. And yeah, when there's other projects, the student next year, just hit me up and we will have another conversation. And
awesome.
Also hit me up and we'll talk marketing, because there's so many ways of doing this shit that isn't just insane. So many ways, man.
Absolutely. And we got some exciting news on our distribution front after the end of Dances, so we're excited to get that out to everybody as well.
Oh, tremendous, man. Well, all the success, man. Success.
Thanks, Kev.
All right, take it easy, man.
Take care.
All right.